So for today's lecture, we're going to focus on a little bit of geography. We're going to try and understand what is a gulf. And the goals for today's lectures are to cover some coastal features of the Gulf of Mexico, the geography of the Gulf, and some major seas, gulfs, and bays from around the world. And so the learning objectives for today are to understand several terms commonly used to describe coastal geology and what those can tell us about the importance of coastal features to humans and wildlife. We'll learn that the Gulf of Mexico shores are home to many lagoons, bays, and harbors that serve as the foundation for culture, civilization, and rich ecosystems. And we'll learn that major coastal water bodies play an extremely important role in human history. So in preparation for today, I asked you to read the introduction to the assigned book for class. And you had a couple of homework questions associated with that introduction. Now, if you didn't get to this, or you don't have the book, you don't have Top Hat going, and you just weren't able to get to this homework, don't worry. Everyone's getting full credit on this homework. I have it as a way to kind of dip your toes into Top Hat and into what homeworks are going to be like for this class. So it was a practice. But today, before we start, I want to kind of recall what you learned from reading that introduction if you did get a chance to read it. In your assigned reading for today's class, Winslow Homer's paintings were used as an example of the important connections between humankind, nature, and history. And here are two of Homer's paintings from the Gulf of Mexico. So this one depicts a more coastal scene where there are two people fishing in a boat and the waters are relatively calm. And this one depicts a boat that looks like lost at sea. It's stormy weather. There are sharks beneath these waves that are quite large. And I'm going to ask you to respond to this discussion. What do these two paintings tell you about the Gulf of Mexico? From looking at these paintings and the differences and similarities between them, what are some characteristics that you think might define a gulf? So if these are both from the Gulf of Mexico, what is a gulf? So go ahead and give me an answer. I believe everyone's going to be able to see your answers. You can reply to other people. This is a forum, a discussion forum type activity. And remember, for credit, you're going to have to participate in some form. So that should be replying to other people or putting down a response as you see fit. Go ahead and hop on Top Hat, and I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to respond to this prompt. So seeing lots of themes here of like variability, how there's a lot of variability in maybe different locations that you are in a gulf. I'm seeing themes of being connected to land, but also connected to a larger body of water like an ocean. Um, saw some people mention that it might be really productive, like because we had a couple of people fishing in that photo there, or in that painting there. Could be really productive. What else am I missing? And please, for credit, go ahead and in the last couple of seconds here that I have this open, just comment on someone's post. Say, I agree, or this is what I was thinking, or something like that. That counts as credit as well. So I won't have this open for too much longer. It can be picturesque and beautiful, or it can be very dangerous, right? Exactly. So maybe if you're living around a Gulf, you might want to be able to find some locations where you can settle that are, usually picturesque and beautiful and not, buffeted by all this crazy wave action and, a ton of man-eating sharks all the time. If you're going to live somewhere, you want to live next to that left picture, right? Where you can just kind of go out to the calm water and fish. And so that kind of leads us into talking about a lot of these coastal features, a lot of these bays, inlets, harbors, safe harbors where people could settle and enjoy all the benefits of the Gulf's productivity without having to deal with all of the variability and the harsh weather conditions that are associated with living near an ocean. So that is what we're talking about today. What are some of these features in the Gulf? Great job. Okay, so coastal features. Some of the most dynamic areas on Earth can be found at the interface of land and the sea in the coastal zone. There are some rules for naming coastal features, but there are plenty of exceptions to these rules. So we'll cover a lot of these today. So a sea is a large body of salt water connected to the ocean, but partially surrounded by land. And so in this image here, sea would be this larger feature from which all of these smaller features branch off. I gave you a PDF. It's in Top Hat. It's also in Moodle. That you can use to fill in these features to kind of test yourself if you wanted to go over these for yourself and see what you remembered and what you didn't. It has just like blank lines for you. You're also welcome to write notes on these slides if you have them printed out or if you have them downloaded. So I'm trying to give you some study guides. So I have the sea in here, which is this larger body of water. A gulf is a large area of sea or ocean that's partially enclosed by land. And so here we have an extension of this sea that's partially enclosed by land, but it has a really large connection to the sea here. A bay is a body of water that's partially enclosed by land, but it has a wide outlet to the sea or ocean. And so this would be an example of a bay. Oftentimes bays have a lot of large rivers that feed into them. And you can see here that this bay doesn't really have much of a constriction in the opening. It has this big wide outlet to the larger sea. So that'd be indicative of a bay. Whereas the Gulf has a little bit more of a constriction there. Deltas and lagoons. So deltas are a deposit of sand or soil or sediment that's usually fan-shaped, but not always, that's formed at the mouth of some rivers. And so the Mississippi River Delta would be a great example of a fan-shaped delta. And so that is depicted on this image here. A lagoon is a shallow body of water that is separated from the sea by sandbars or coral reefs. And so the lagoon here you can see is separated by these sandbars from the surrounding sea. That would provide this lagoon a lot of protection from the sea, from the larger waves, and so it would make it an excellent area to settle, However, as I mentioned, lagoons tend to be really shallow, so not so great for ships to enter. A fjord is depicted over here. It's a narrow, deep valley that's carved by glaciers and flooded by the sea or the ocean. So this is formed by glacial activity. That's what separates a fjord from anything else. A sound is a long, broad inlet like this here that lies parallel to the coastline and separates the coastline from islands. And so it's the area between islands and the coastline. An estuary is a marine ecosystem where freshwater meets saltwater. So the term usually describes regions near the mouths of rivers, and estuaries can be bays, lagoons, sounds, or deltas. So all of these different features, if they're associated with the mixing of freshwater and saltwater, could be an estuary. And so here in this image, we have a river entering a gulf, and this location where the freshwater and saltwater mixes would be an estuary. This bay area here could also be an estuary. There are a variety of other small coastal features on this image. An inlet is a small arm of the sea, and so it's just an area kind of where the sea continues in a narrow passage into the land. A cove is a small sheltered bay, so that cove is different from a normal bay in terms of its size. It's just relatively small compared to a bay. A harbor is a bay or a cove that's protected from rough water by a peninsula, piers, jetties, or other natural or artificial structures. You can see here there's a peninsula that sticks out and offers some shelter for this harbor. And a strait is a narrow passage that connects two larger bodies of water. So in this case, this strait moves between these two islands and connects the sea to the sound behind it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quiz now. For credit on this quiz that you'll have to be on Top Hat, so please pop on Top Hat. This quiz question is going to be a matching question. So I want you to match the following coastal features to the blanks, the letters A, B, C, and D on this diagram. Ideally, you'll do this without your notes. I have no way of policing that, so just do what you got to do. Okay, so you see the A, B, C, and D there. You should have some answers that you can try and match to those letters. So I'll give you an example of the type of question that I might ask on the exam. Okay, I think everybody submitted. So the correct answers were A is a cove. So this right here is a cove. B is a gulf. We had C is a delta. And then D is a bay. Nice job. Okay, the next exercise that I have for you involves a tour of the Gulf of Mexico. So I have a PDF in Top Hat or on Moodle of a variety of coastal features in the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see some of these are filled out. So these are the types of things that I'm pointing out: Corpus Christi Bay, Apalachicola Bay, but some of these features are blanks. And so I'll be expecting you to know these blank features from this Google Earth project. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy this link. I don't know if you're going to be able to click this. So I'll go ahead and copy it in chat. And I want you to go through this Google Earth project and just see the various features in the Gulf of Mexico that I expect you to know. So you'll be responsible for identifying the 10 blank features for the exam. I don't expect you to memorize the filled-in features. And as I mentioned in the last class, I will be giving you the exam questions beforehand, so you don't have to freak out about memorizing all of these. You can kind of see what I'll be asking. Is everyone able to access that Gulf of Mexico tour on Google Earth? It takes a couple seconds to load. Great. If you go ahead and click, I think it's Start Presentation. Mine hasn't even loaded yet. On the left-hand side, it should say Present, the little box to present, and it'll click you through these. If you click Present, and then down in the left, there will be arrows to click through all the different locations that I've outlined on here, and there's a little bit of verbiage underneath each one. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to click through this. How are we doing? Do we want more time? Anyone feeling motion sick yet? 1 minute? Okay, no problem. Mostly just miss Orange Beach, I know. So Bailey asks, what type of characteristics define a sound? So a sound is the water in between the coast and some sort of barrier islands. You'll notice likely as you scroll through a lot of these place names that sometimes when they are named, so for instance, Breton Sound doesn't really so much seem like a sound, it might seem more like a bay. So naming conventions don't necessarily stick necessarily to the definitions of what a sound or a bay are sometimes, which is obnoxious, but could a sound be considered a wider kind of strait? So a sound could be considered a kind of strait if it's connecting two different larger bodies of water. So if the sound is just a bit of water that's in between the coast and some barrier islands, and it doesn't really connect any like seas or gulfs or anything, then it's just a sound. If that passage of water is connecting, for instance, the Gulf of Mexico to, you know, a different bay or a different larger type body of water, then it might be considered a strait. Yeah, I mean that would make sense to me. That would be probably a good example of a sound that is also a strait, right? Yeah, good call. You can see there's a lot of wishy-washiness in the naming conventions here. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Just so you know, for you honor students, I am expecting you to take a look at the detailed information, the stuff that's in those text boxes for the Google Earth project. For each of the features that were blanks, you are going to be responsible for that information as well. Though of course, like I mentioned previously, I will be giving you the exam questions, so you'll see what I mean. But anyways, the information on those exam questions might come from those boxes in the Google Earth project. Just for the features that are listed here, which were your blanks. Oh, I'm not going to do this. We're not going to do a web search for that project was to do a web search for one of the places on the Gulf of Mexico tour and tell us an interesting fact you discovered about human history or natural history or economy or tourism. There's a lot of cool stuff from a lot of those sites, but we will skip that today in the interest of time. I want to finish up this class going over a couple of major seas, gulfs, and bays of the world. What I want you to know for these is where the bodies of water are located, which continents they're in, and large countries that are bordering them, as well as the information that's on these slides. There aren't too many of these. The first one that I expect you to know is the Mediterranean Sea. And so you can see here from this image that the Mediterranean Sea is bordered by several countries in Europe and also North Africa. It's almost completely enclosed by land, but it's connected to the Atlantic Ocean via the Strait of Gibraltar, which we've just talked about. This sea was an important route for merchants and travelers for many ancient cultures like the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Persians, Arab Empire, Ottoman Empire. I mean, there's a whole lot of history in the Mediterranean Sea. That's right. That's right. And there were a lot of different groups that controlled the Mediterranean Sea at various points in history. Yeah, has quite a storied history. The South China Sea is actually part of the Pacific Ocean. So you can see here some of the countries that border the South China Sea, such of course as China, the Philippines, Malaysia. The sea is a stage for many territorial disputes. You often hear about the South China Sea in the news. It's extremely valuable territory, and this is the reason for those disputes. 1/3 of the world's shipping passes through it. It's a lot of shipping. It has productive fisheries that feed Southeast Asia, and it has substantial oil and gas reserves. The Persian Gulf. So here's another Gulf besides our Gulf of Mexico. This is the Persian Gulf. You can see the countries that border it would be Iran, Saudi Arabia, to name a couple. It's connected to the Indian Ocean by the Strait of Hormuz. Probably pronouncing these wrong, but that's okay. Site of many battles in the Iran-Iraq War, and it's the namesake of the Gulf War. So the Gulf War, the stage of that war was very much the Persian Gulf. The northwestern end is the delta of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. It is the world's largest single source of petroleum, a lot of oil reserves, and the oldest known civilization developed along the Persian Gulf. So clearly very important for human history, both past and present. So you can see here an example of the strait that's connecting basically two gulfs. So two larger bodies of water connected by a very narrow passage. Our next gulf is the Gulf of Alaska. The Gulf of Alaska is part of the Indian Ocean. You can see here it's formed essentially by the arm of Alaska that kind of shoots down and forms this, I mean, it's a very broad inlet, but we call it the Gulf of Alaska and not just part of the Pacific Ocean. It is quite different actually from normal ocean water because you get a lot of glacial meltwater there, and that meltwater is very slow to mix with normal ocean water because of changes in density or differences in density between the two water masses. And so you actually get a difference in color in the water of the Gulf. And you can see that image here where there's actually a pretty clear boundary between the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of Alaska in terms of characteristics of the water. You could sail over the boundary of the Gulf of Alaska and notice a difference in the color of the water. It's one of the most productive places on Earth, and we don't entirely understand why. So it's a downwelling zone. So typically upwelling is associated with productivity, but instead we have downwelling in this area, and so you wouldn't expect a whole lot of nutrients to come up from depth. The glacial melt is relatively low nutrients, so the nutrients really aren't being delivered from the meltwater, but there is nutrient delivery from volcanic sediment, so that could be some of the reason why. And then this area is notorious for generating big storms. This is like a big storm factory in the Gulf of Alaska. And the Chesapeake Bay, which I love and we'll talk about often in this course, is on the east coast of the United States. And so here you can see some of the states that form the boundary for the Chesapeake Bay are Virginia, Maryland would be the major two. This is a drowned river valley estuary, and so this was the estuary was part of a river, and as water levels increased, as sea level increased, the sea moved into the estuary and created a bay. So it's essentially a drowned river. The reason there was a river there is all of the water flows to that location because it's the site of a meteor impact from about 35 million years ago. So this bay was formed by a meteor impact. It has salinities ranging from nearly full strength seawater all the way to freshwater, and so you get a lot of variety within the bay. And it's very important for American history. So it's a site of key battles in the American Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the American Civil War. And you can see some of the reasons why. For instance, it's a direct passage to Washington, D.C., to Baltimore, to Richmond, all very key locations. And so you can see that to access those locations via water might be advantageous. And so the Chesapeake Bay is strategically important. Bay of Bengal is on the northeastern part of the Indian Ocean. You have many major rivers flowing into this bay. The northern point is formed by the confluence of several rivers. You can see some of the large countries that surround this are India, Myanmar, Bangladesh. At the confluence of these rivers, you get this fan called the Bengal fan, which is a deep sea fan of sediment that covers almost the entire bay bottom. And it's the largest abyssal fan in the world. So all of that river sediment fans out and spreads across the deep sea floor. There are very, very many important Buddhist and Hindu temples and sacred sites along the coast of the Bay of Bengal. And this is likely going to be a major player of strategic importance in the future because surrounding nations are increasingly becoming major nations and rising powers. So this is probably the next South China Sea in terms of being in the news quite often. So it's good to know where it is. So those are the features that I want you to know, major coastal features around the world. Remember in this course, even though we're focusing on the Gulf of Mexico, and we did quite a bit in the lecture today, we also want to know about many features around the world and how they compare to the Gulf of Mexico and how they're important for humanity. So I think we did cover that today. Does anyone have any questions about anything we covered today? Let's see, I've got something in Zoom chat. Yeah, thanks. Adam, that would be great. Sorry for the hiccups in Top Hat today. It's going to be a little bit of a learning process, but we'll definitely find a way to make it work for everyone as we learn more about what we can and can't do in Top Hat. And I'll just do a better job next time about letting you guys know of the various materials that I want you to download before class that might be useful for you to fill out. I think that that's a good solution for the issues today. But yeah, just so you know, I'm thinking about it, figuring out how to make this work. So just be a little patient for me. And yeah, you can see all the cool stuff that we're able to do with Top Hat. A lot of the cool questions I'm able to answer or ask you all, and the discussions we're able to have. So there are a lot of benefits too. All right, wrap up. Today we learned several terms commonly used to describe coastal geology and what they could tell us about the importance of coastal features to humans and wildlife. We learned the Gulf of Mexico shores are home to many lagoons, bays, harbors, etc. That serve as a foundation for culture, civilization, and rich ecosystems. And we learned that major coastal water bodies play an extremely important role in human history. And next time, We're going to cover the formation of the Gulf of Mexico and many features in the Gulf of Mexico, how we measure seafloor spreading, which will be a little bit of a review, but also some new stuff, the formation of major bathymetric features, and how other coastal features around the world are formed. So I will see you in class on Friday.